Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to the last part of language change. In this part, we will see what are the results of language change. What are the results of language change? So the first point is when language change is accompanied by splits of populations, language change results first in dialect divergence. For example, a population lives at one place with one language, and then the population splits into parts, and some parts or one part of that population moves to other place, right? So in this way, the language change results in a dialect divergence. The change happens only in dialects, not in complete new language. For example, we see here the kinds of differences we see between British and American English. So it's English anyway, but with different dialects. And people from Britain, they migrated to US with their language, and changes occurred in their dialect, in their pronunciation there. And between French of France and the French of Quebec, and between New World and Old World Spanish and Portuguese. So this is the example of dialect divergence, and it happened due to split in populations. Second is over longer time. Over longer time periods, if change happens over longer time, we see the emergence of separate languages, not only the dialect this time. In the case of a longer time, is emergence of separate languages. Completely new language or separate language emerges in this case, as happened in the contemporary Romance languages, separated by about 2000 years, and the Germanic languages, whose divergence began perhaps 500 years earlier. So both of these families, the Romance languages and Germanic languages, are part of Indo-European languages, for which the Ethnologue web page lists 425 languages under the umbrella of Indo-European languages. Now the question is, what is language and what is dialect? What are the parameters to determine that this is language and this is a dialect? Although political considerations often intervene in whether a particular speech variety is considered to be a language or a dialect. Although there is political influence on the decision whether this speech variety is a language or a dialect, but the basic idea behind linguistic classifications is that dialects are mutually intelligible, whereas languages are not mutually intelligible. So this is the only thing. If the languages, two different speech varieties are mutually intelligible, so they will be considered as dialects, and if they are not mutually intelligible, so they are considered as separate languages. Of course, the question of intelligibility is always relative. So now you'll see here the following phrases in the coming table. You will see there. They are taken from a spontaneous speech of Chicagoans recorded in the early 1990s. So they were difficult for many non-Chicagoans to understand correctly. So here is a story of a cross-dialectal comprehension test. In getting experiments designed to test cross-dialectal comprehension in American English. Subjects first heard a single word, and then a slightly longer segment along that word. So some other segment was attached to that word, and then the participants of the experiment, they heard the whole phrase or the whole sentence, and that phrase or sentence may have disambiguated the original mishearing. Because first, when they heard first only single word, there was a kind of mishearing. But when they heard longer segment, sometimes it helped to remove the ambiguity. And when they heard the full phrase or sentence, so that probably removed the ambiguity on the original mishearing. So these experiments were part of the research project on cross-dialectal comprehension done at the linguistic lab at Penn. This is the name of place, Penn. Here is the table. You see, we have this original segment in the first column. So first, the subjects, the participants, they heard only these words. For example, drop, socks, block, met, steady, head. They said spontaneously by Chicagoans, and the subjects were non-Chicagoans in that experiment. And here, what happened when they heard this? Okay, many people misheard when they were tested, of course, by some means. So it was identified that many people misheard as nothing or nonsense word containing vowel in that. Okay, so and first expansion, after that, after drop, they were given this phrase, this segment, a longer segment than the first one, massive drop. Okay, and the second expansion, they gave this text, this full sentence or phrase. The plane was steady for a while and then it took a massive drop. Same with the next word and all other words, socks, and some people heard as sacks. And first explanation, you had to wear socks, and second expansion, you had to wear socks, no sandals. So of course this explanation is really helpful to understand the word, the target word socks. Block, some people heard it as black, and when in the first explanation, one block, one black doesn't make sense here, so maybe many people corrected themselves, it's not black. And old senior citizen living on one block, so that's very clear. Even if they misheard in the first hearing, here they might have corrected by themselves. Met, some people heard it mut, they met. My parents went to Cuba, and that's where they met. Steady for a while. The plane was steady for a while, and then it took a massive drop. Had, some people heard it had. Shook her head. This woman in while who just smiled at her and shook her head. All right. So here, these misunderstandings are based on the fact that Chicago speakers, along with 40-50 million other people in the inland north dialect, including these places, Rochester, Buffalo, Detroit, and Syracuse or Syracuse, I'm not sure about this actually, and other cities of that region. So they have a rotation of their short vowels, like the low unrounded vowel of the short O. Words like drop, socks, blacks, block, and hot, they do not round this O sound, but it is fronted to the position where other American dialects have words like that. So they front this rounded O, these Chicagoans, but other Americans they say, like other Americans, they say the words like that, hat, black, frap, and sax. And where short E words like mat, steady, and head can sound like mot, study, and thud, or mat, static, and had. Same is the case with E, so they are also fronted by Chicagoans, unlike other Americans. The Ethnologue Database includes more than 6,700 languages spoken in 228 countries. They say that their criterion for listing speech varieties separately is low intelligibility, as far as that can be ascertained. I mean, they try their best to separate speech varieties. I mean, to declare speech varieties as separate language. Their criteria is the low intelligibility. Thank you very much. Here is the assignment. So you will write a note on language change. So you will highlight the causes, types, and results of language change. Thank you much, and wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.